The Justice Department ratcheting up its case against Rudy Giuliani as it now pours through the electronic devices and other materials it took from his both home and office during the early morning raid last week. The DOJ, they're investigating whether or not Rudy broke any federal laws with his dealings in Ukraine when he was Trump's personal attorney, while obviously Trump sat in the Oval. Michael Cohen, Donald Trump's former personal attorney who flipped on his one-time boss, says Rudy could and probably will do the same.
Rudy, I told you so. I told you so.
What do you mean? What did you tell him?
Well, what I told him was that Donald Trump doesn't care about anyone or anything, that he will be the next one to be thrown under the bus. And that's exactly what's going to happen. Prior to Donald becoming president, Rudy didn't like Donald, and Donald certainly didn't like Rudy. So do I think Rudy will give up Donald in a heartbeat? Absolutely.
Trump, at least for now, is still defending Giuliani.
Rudy Giuliani is a great patriot. He does these things. He just loves this country. And they raid his apartment. It's like so unfair and such a it's like a double standard like I don't think anybody's ever seen before. It's very, very unfair. Rudy is a patriot who loves this country.
Rudy himself, he's going on offense, doing interviews on friendly programs like Tucker Carlson's.
The reality is that that warrant is completely illegal. The only way you can get a search warrant is if you can show that there's some evidence that the person is going to destroy the evidence or is going to run away with the evidence. Well, I've had it for 2 years and I haven't destroyed it. And they also got it from the iCloud.
I want to bring in my next guest to discuss. He just penned a piece in Politico magazine with the following headline: Giuliani's legal trouble is Trump's too. To save himself, the president's former lawyer might have to spill damning secrets. Renato Mariotti, he's also a former federal prosecutor. I want to get into this, but Rudy is not, some guy who had a shingle outside his door and didn't know any better. He's a former U.S. attorney, Renato. I mean, the idea, and I love how it was spun here that Rudy's doing this out of patriotic duty and love of country. Rudy was compensated very handsomely for this process all the way along. I mean, it is a stunning fall from grace regardless of how this case shakes out.
Well, that's right. I mean, putting aside the fact that he was a presidential candidate, was a beloved mayor, America's mayor, celebrated national figure, putting all that aside, he was, as you put it, the United States attorney for the Southern District of New York, not just some person who got hired as a federal prosecutor, but literally the lead federal prosecutor. So he knows better. Like when he went on television and said that you need to get a search warrant, you need evidence that the person's destroying what's inside the premises. That's false. That is absolutely false. And he knows better. Any criminal defense attorney or a former prosecutor would know that. I think Rudy Giuliani has really gotten himself in a lot of trouble.
We saw what Michael Cohen had to say. Given the track record of Trump and Rudy and their, let's say, short loyalty spans, if you follow their recent histories, if Rudy wants to cooperate or better needs to cooperate with this probe, he's probably got a lot of things that the feds would like to hear.
Yeah, look, I think at a certain point, Giuliani is going to likely get there. I mean, think about what happened with Cohen, right? At a certain point, Trump was like, who's Michael Cohen? Or, I don't know. He has no idea who Michael Cohen is or what he's doing. Yet he was somebody who was attached to Trump's hip for quite some period of time. Somebody who was as close as anyone was to Trump. I don't think for a minute that Trump is going to take some sort of fall for Rudy or put himself in a difficult position for Rudy. And that's really where Giuliani's going to have to go in order to defend himself here. He's really, what he needs is Trump to take the stand and say, I knew what Giuliani was doing. I instructed him to do all of that. He was doing all of it in my direction. And who believes for a minute that Trump's going to put himself and stick his neck out there, put himself out there for Rudy like that? I don't see that happening. And that means that Giuliani's going to be in a tough position. And I think his interests at a certain point are going to be adverse to Trump's.
And, I mean, if anybody should know better, he was warned reportedly going back to 2019 by the feds that he was a target of basically misinformation campaigns on the part of Ukrainians, but really through Russian interests, etc. he was warned. Apparently, he disregarded that. And again, we come back to Rudy aligning himself and what we saw during the campaign. This is not, whatever anybody says, Rudy's not a dumb guy. It's just shocking to me, Renato, that he kept putting himself in these kind of positions and aligning himself with somebody who had a track record over the course of just his presidency of, forget about contorting the law, tearing it apart and cutting loose anyone who was a loose end.
Yeah, I think at this point you have to seriously question Giuliani's judgment. I've been in TV studios with Mr. Giuliani and watched him sort of wing it and answer questions on the fly about an investigation into his client that was, of course, the president of the United States, extremely important matter. I really got the sense that the guy wasn't prepared at all, was just making stuff up as he went along. We all remember him caught in a hotel room, right, by a prankster, Borat or whatever, and in a compromising situation. I really think that, he is somebody who has been very foolish and foolhardy in his behavior and reckless, making false statements to judges during the January 6th, the run up to that, where he was in court trying to overturn the election results. So just a lot of very poor choices by Giuliani. And really, he deserves to have his reputation torched by this. The question remains, of course, there's a big difference between being disgraced and being in prison. And I think it will be interesting to see how that develops, because when the feds come and raid your apartment and steal your devices away to make images of them for evidence, that's a bad sign, and it means that you may very well be seeing the inside of a prison cell someday.
And Renato, first of all, it's probably not wise he's continuing doing interviews even on Fox News here. I know if you were counseling me, you wouldn't be advising him to be in front of the public eye any more than he already is. But give an idea to some of the things that the feds may have been looking for, and if there is digital evidence of it. Is this more of the fraud variety that he should be concerned about, and not, obviously reporting income here, et cetera? What's the big exposure for Rudy?
Well, we know, for example, that he was really involved in the thick of this Ukrainian matter that ultimately was a touch point for that first impeachment inquiry. And he was, for example, involved in pushing Trump to fire the ambassador to Ukraine. And what the New York Times, I know, had reported was essentially that what the feds are looking at is whether or not he was actually lobbying on behalf of Ukrainian officials and oligarchs without revealing that, which is problematic on a number of levels. On one level, you have to disclose when you're a foreign agent and you're conducting lobbying activities. So that's the criminal law angle. But it's also very problematic if you're lobbying your client, the president of the United States, to do things in order for your own self-interest without disclosing that to the client. So very problematic. And I suspect what the feds are looking for in those devices, in part, are going to be communications, because those devices usually even contain remnants of deleted communications. There'll be metadata there. There could even be location information, a lot of data that can help fill in the blanks for prosecutors who may only have limited windows thus far into some of Rudy's prior communications.
Now, I'm going to ask you to take a leap here, but it seems to me that there wasn't a great appetite within the Biden administration and even Merrick Garland to go down this road, unless one would think there was compelling evidence that that the feds thought they were going to get their hands on. They weren't just going on a fishing expedition here for all the political considerations, and at least the Biden folks seeming to say that they wanted to move on from this, A. And B, you've said this before, but just to get this across to the audience, the only person can really keep Rudy, assuming that there is digital evidence they're out of hot water, is Trump. And Trump has shown no indication here that he's going to be taking a bullet for anybody, especially since pardons weren't advanced here at the end of the Trump term for either of these two players. So the only card Rudy would have to play is to say, no. The president completely was in the loop on this. In fact, he directed me to do as followed here. I wasn't acting as some rogue agent as much as he's leading you to believe. This seems like it's headed for that kind of a conclusion. It's a he said, he said.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, I think just to be crystal clear, I think his best defense is I was directed to do all of this by the president of the United States. So I was acting in the United States' best interest and was advancing U.S. interests, not foreign interests, because I was doing what the president wanted. That I think has to be Giuliani's position. I don't think Trump is going to want to move his lips on the witness stand and swear an oath and say that, which is what's going to put Giuliani in a very difficult situation. Because if Trump denies it and is like, I don't know, you'll have to talk to Rudy, I didn't know what was going on, that puts Rudy in a very difficult position. I think he has to point the finger at Trump. And, regarding this situation for Rudy, I think that the reality of the situation for him is he's put himself in a spot where he almost has to rely on Trump. Unless he's got some other card to play, some sort of written communications, if all he has is just all of his phone calls with Trump, he really is essentially, like, as you say, he said with Trump.
If I had told anybody 5 years ago that Michael Cohen would have more legal credibility than Rudy Giuliani, I could have gotten great odds on that one. But at this point, it's pretty hard to argue with that statement. Renato, I appreciate the time. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Up next, a segment we like to call So Right They're Wrong. Tonight's edition featuring on one man, Tucker Carlson. After the break, we're going to show you how the Fox News host is spreading lunatic theories and comments that aren't just totally off the wall, they're downright dangerous.